I'm Stefan Baumann. I would like to invite you on a special journey to discover the splendor, encounter the grandeur, feel the excitement. Come along with me as we experience the thrill of painting outdoors. A 3-day journey that will change your art forever. In one of America's most stunning locations, Mount Shasta. Everything you need to know is on our website, www.stefanbaumann.com. You know, I noticed that when we set up, now we normally have this little corner there where the people who are in class who want to paint from life come in, and some of you have really brought in some beautiful stuff. And every week when we do our classroom over there in that corner, it's always a challenge what to paint. And in the process of doing that, we end up finding beautiful flowers or a beautiful antique or some light or some, something extraordinary. I go outside here, they have beautiful botanical things, and we've dug up some really nice flowers and stuff to paint. And when people come to art class, when they come to class, they expect to paint something pretty. I mean, when students come to class originally, when they sign up for classes, they'll like go, oh, so what are we going to paint? And they assume maybe we'll paint a pear or an apple. That's the way that most people think. But then there comes a time when the world doesn't need any more apples or no pears. What now? And so what we do is we start looking at the world and going, okay, so we don't want to paint things again. We don't want to paint apples and pears anymore. We need to paint effects. It's the effects on things that make things interesting. And this is what I teach you how to do, how to work with lights and shadows, how to work with temperatures and values and color, how that all works. That's kind of what this class is all about. And I nag you to death. You know, put highlights on that apple so that the apple is stunning. Paint a quintessential apple. Start off with something that really is a beautiful apple. Don't just paint an ugly apple. And if you're going to paint an ugly apple, make it really ugly. Caravaggio's got a painting where he's got like fruit in a bowl, and the fruit is kind of rotten. And it almost has like an allegory to it, a little story about the rotten fruit. If you think you're painting Judas, having a bowl of rotten fruits kind of says a little bit about this person here. So it's kind of good to kind of work that way, but you always want the quintessential. What does a rotten apple look like? And how can you paint it so people intentionally know you wanted to paint a rotten apple? So that starts to get into like what makes it look like that, but still a thing painting. So I argue and bend your arms and say, it's the light, put the light on it. And then you finally do that, and you come out with a really gorgeous apple. And then what? So then I come out with a mop and a bucket. And I see two of the students are like, oh! It's not the kind of subject matter you necessarily would think. But you kind of all just believe in me and you just go ahead and do it. And isn't it interesting when you start painting it? And when you actually isolate the effect of light. And we did this on your dog, Mercedes, today. You know, it's like really get that light to pop. Once you learn how to do that, get the light to pop. You can paint an old bucket with a mop and actually come up with kind of something interesting. And probably even more interesting than that apple that you thought you'd come to art class and paint. Because now it's an interesting effect of light on something that's not that interesting. Clark Hilling's one of my favorite artists that I watched for a while. He just recently passed away. When he was younger, he went to the Grand Central Gallery up in New York, and they looked at his work and they noticed that a few of his paintings had laundry hanging in them because he painted like the Southwest. And so he painted laundry and kind of some poverty and stuff. And the owner of the gallery said, "Oh, no, 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 Clark. Women do not want to see laundry on a painting that they're going to hang in their living room." And they said, while we're at it, people don't like looking at donkeys either. He made a whole career out of laundry and donkeys and became one of the most noted American painters in the 1980s. Amazing. Really great art isn't pretty. It's what you do with it that counts. And hopefully, if you have the skills to do that, you can make ordinary extraordinary. Or like from Stephen to Stefan. And so what we want to do is we kind of take a look at these real quick. Whose is this?
Mine.
Now, how many hours were you on it? About 2 hours? All in all, by the time you got your coffee and settled in, and 2 hours?
Got back in the swing of how to squeeze the hand of a tube.
Yeah, because you haven't been here for a while. And that's another thing that people don't realize, is that, you know, you kind of, we've stopped for the holidays and we've stopped for things and you had some issues. You lose that momentum, you could lose a lot. And a lot of times students will say, okay, I'm not going to paint for a while because I want to paint on my own, figure out what I've got, and I'll come back to you. And I'll go, go ahead, go. And 5 years later, they roll back in again and go, so how was that? And they go, I didn't touch a brush from the moment I left here. 5 years. And I go, yeah, you kind of have to stick with it. And so consistency has a lot to do with it. So by the time you get ramped up, and you're only gone a short period of time, but you kind of feel a little bit out of the groove. Yeah, displaced. But look at how beautiful you have that. Now, get that, I didn't go out and try to find, they had 2 mops in there. I think one's pink and one's blue, and I just grabbed one. I wasn't like going, oh, blue and yellow. You know, some people are like, if you have a yellow lemon, do you put a purple background? First thing, complementary colors like that, yellow and purple. Anytime I see that, I want to slap the artist. Because the color and contrast is so strong that it's irritating. It's nice to have a little bit of that complementary color to play in it. But when you're playing against, you know, if you would have painted a purple background back there intentionally, that would have been just awful. You know, that wouldn't have been a good choice. But I just grabbed the mop for nothing more than just I needed a mop. And then, you know, we had the pole. And if you notice, in setting up, and this is where most people's problems are when they do still life in my coaching classes. In my coaching class, everybody's in my coaching program all have to work from life. Their biggest issue they have is in the setup. And I have students that spend a week setting something up. So the setup is the most important thing. I don't have a week when we're setting something up like this. But you kind of have to throw everything you want to put into it. And then you kind of flip it around. So if you remember, I had that long mop thing. And so originally I had it sitting up there. I stuck the mop inside. One of you said, oh, I can't see the mop. And I go, you're right. So then I popped it up on top and I looked at it and go, well, that's a long distance between the mop head and the bucket itself. So you kind of have to think, what am I going to do with this distance in here? And yeah, you could have shrunk it down. But there's a truth in people's heads, even if they never thought about a mop before. There's a truth in knowing how long a mop handle is. And if you shrink that mop handle down so that you'd have less in there, people are going to go, something doesn't fit right. Now this is the thing with your painting, Dottie. Remember when you were doing your painting, you had this out just a little bit too far. And having that having that distance, not being 100%, we've never really looked at a bucket like this and thought of it as a painting thing. But you've seen enough of these buckets that if the proportion is just ever so slightly off, something will trigger in the viewer's mind that something's wrong. The only way you could successfully do something like this is to make sure that you get the proportions absolutely correct. So I didn't have a lot of leeway. So I took the mop and I laid the mop on top, and then all of a sudden it dawned on me, that makes sense, get some blue next to the yellow. It wasn't intentional. It was like, wow, that's kind of cool. And then we draped beautiful hair, we draped the strings. I mean, a lot of thought goes into this in a second, right? So then I look at it and then I fiddle with the light. So you got to have a light. And you start shuffling it around and moving it around, and I look at it and go, oh, that's pretty good. Griselle comes over and she goes, can we just turn that thing a little bit this way? And I did, and it was like she was right. It was just a little too horizontal. So you have to test it out and look at it, see all kinds of different proportions. There was stuff in the background that I told her to neutralize and take out. Where's the center focal point?
Corner of the bucket.
Corner of the bucket?
Griselle.
Yeah. No, it's not Griselle, it's Patty Murray.
Oh, Patty Murray.
So yeah, the center focal point is there. And the thing is, look at how big and thick and luscious that is. Yeah, how do I get that yellow to show up? How do I make it look yellow? You know, really bright. Well, the thicker the paint, the brighter it appears. So if you really gob on paint like this, much thicker, twice as thick as this, that starts to look like a highlight because it's really, really thick. So what you said, what was luscious about a bucket?
When you said that in my brain, it automatically went, what is luscious about a mop bucket? Especially when you're slopping around trying to mop the floor. I mean, the two is hard for me to put together.
Well, yeah, but see, that's just it. You know, I would.
It's hard for me too.
One of my favorite.
I saw a mop.
You saw a mop, and then you.
The last thing I wanted to look at was a mop.
The last thing you wanted to look at was a mop, and the thing is,
Look at my paint.
you know, I'm a big fan of Oscar Wilde. I think he's really clever. He's one of the few poets and storytellers that I like because he'll pack in a lot of things. And last night I was watching The Ideal Husband, and there was a lot of things that were in there. But there was something about it, and I didn't write it down, but it's really clever. I'll get it to you later. But it's like we really don't see things till we look at them, and we really need to find the beauty in it before we actually see it. That's paraphrasing, not exactly. So we really have to look at it, and we have to find the beauty in that. So we had to find the beauty in this bucket. In order to find the beauty, you have to get rid of your prejudice. You know, a lot of people are very prejudiced about all kinds of things. A lot of people are prejudiced towards people, but they're also prejudiced towards artichokes.
About what?
Artichokes. They're prejudiced. They will not eat an artichoke. And so until they try one. And then all of a sudden when they put down their prejudices and try an artichoke, they go, wow, it's really not that bad. And then all of a sudden you kind of come to an artichoke in a different way. And you know, you'd starting to see the beauty in the artichoke. You know, so you kind of have to find the beauty in anything, even a very ugly face. You have to find in what's really beautiful about it. When you start falling in love with the beauty of it, you start actually seeing it. And your association with a bucket, see, when I look at it, I look at color. I look at shape, form, highlights. You look at it as work.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of prejudice that you have to pull. So then what I do is I look at it, like you said, well, what do you find luscious? Luscious is that word. I mean, the thing is, the reason why I look for the word luscious is because if I tell you, oh, I want you to paint that apple lusciously. Better than just saying, oh, just paint it. If I say lusciously, what does that bring into you? You know, words are so important in describing things. And if you go, every painting I'm going to put in luscious brushstrokes. If you just said to yourself, I'm going to paint luscious brushstrokes, my shadows and my lights are just going to be luscious. I don't even know what that word really means in Wikipedia, but we kind of know what that means. And especially when we go, luscious. Luscious brushstrokes, okay, luscious paint. It's like all of a sudden you get like Avendanza, big, thick, bold, beautiful color. Not just pretty color, and not even just beautiful colors, luscious colors. It's like a step up. And so when we're looking at, look at that luscious yellow. right out of the tube. Yeah, Van Gogh painted very lusciously. He lavished the paint lusciously on his canvas. Van Gogh painted lusciously, thick. You know, you could say, oh, that person looks thick. Or you could say, that person looks luscious. Rubens' thick women were luscious. All of a sudden it's like, oh, that's a good thing. You know, if you go, oh, all of her women were fat. It's like...
They were voluptuous.
Voluptuous, but I don't know, voluptuous is kind of like but luscious is like, oh, luscious. Oh, whose is this?
That's mine.
Okay, Dottie. So what were you thinking?
Well, I was one of those that was thinking, why are we painting this?
Well, the thing is, if you do it just right, I mean, Carol, we just finished her waterfall painting. And literally, when we finally got to the end, I wanted a highlight to be just on that tree. Passing the waterfall and everything. Remember when I put that one little cube of light in there? It's like, rarely do you get that opportunity to put a little dab of luscious highlight on a tree that's the size of a chiclet on a large canvas. When you can get it down to that. So that Sargent was really good at that. Getting the painting down to just that little. Rembrandt also. You see this beautiful painting of a general, and all of a sudden the light goes right down and hits the side of his nose and gets a little shine on the red there. It's like, whew. Yeah, that is extraordinary. So you can get that as really highlight, but you have to kind of play around with it. You know, first thing you got to kind of get this in shadow. Now we didn't set it up for that. So you remember we paint what we see lusciously?
It was the brightest spot from where I was standing.
Mm-hmm.
But
And you do have a kind of light here. So there's a few tricks that we have. Yeah. If you would have darkened the background, you had more contrast. Because the first thing, a center focal point has to have the brightest light. It also has, it's usually up against the darkest dark. And oftentimes you can push that on a canvas. You can push the darkest dark. The center focal point also has hardest line. So when I'm looking at you, Mary's out of focus. When I'm looking at this is out of focus. So I would eliminate the lines all in through here. The follow through with the light is here, but all this other stuff kind of distracts us in this. You have good eye magnets to there, it's a good start. But it wasn't set up for you to do that. And if you had your choice, you could have manipulated the lights. You could also have paid me $50 and I would have done it for you too. So do I want a painting of a mop and a bucket? Is that what we're trying to do, is paint a mop and a bucket? No.
Which way you're looking at.
No.
No.
No, we're not painting a mop in the bucket. That's why I put the mop in the bucket out there. The last thing I want to see is a mop in a bucket. Now, the thing that I had a lot of questions this week with my coaching students is about painting on location and not using photographs and all this stuff. And the thing is, what we do in class is that I am here to kind of teach you how to put lights and shadows into a painting, to bypass the subject matter and our prejudice towards the subject matter and paint luscious brushstrokes on luscious paintings with color. But in order to do that, there's things that I know that you don't know that I'm trying to pass on to you. That's why I'm a teacher and coach. And there's things that happen that you can tell that are happening, and then there are things that you don't know, I don't know, nobody knows, but we're trying to figure out what that know is, and then you kind of work with that. So you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know that you don't know it until all of a sudden we get there. And we get to a place like this. And so now it's like, now what? And so some of my students go, well, you know, I'm trying to break away from photography altogether. I refuse, I repel from photography. I want to be a painter that just paints alla prima. I go, that's silly. I said, how many artists do you honestly think are truly alla prima painters? A lot of them you probably have seen in the magazines and stuff, and they say they're plein air painters, and they are. But I guarantee you most of those people will work in their studio afterwards. And most plein air painters, because it's really difficult. One of the guys who I coached in the morning, he goes, damn, that's hard. And I go, yes. Things that are worth doing are hard. That's what makes them special. So with plein air painting, it is hard. It is a hard thing to do. It will take you years to be able to do an alla prima thing like this. It's amazing how well you did today. But to think, oh, I'm just going to put this away now. It's like, no, you take a picture of it, you go home and you work and you do, because ultimately, what are we after? We're after just a really good painting, regardless. The viewer or the buyer doesn't know what you got to get there, and they don't care. Unfortunately, the only thing the viewer is interested in is whether or not that painting matches their couch. That's really down to where they are. And it's, they either relate to it some way, or it matches something they've got. There are very few art collectors out there. And I've run into people that go, I'll be damned if I paint for people's couches. And I'm going, you should be really glad if you can. You know, because it's a lonely world out there if you're going to be just painting for the art collectors. Because when it comes right down to it, it's like, Harold, where are we going to put that? And I go, oh, I just love it. You know, this dead moose. It's like, wow, it's great. And she's like, not in my house. So that kind of tells you who's really got the money, right? Anyway, so I know with the mop and stuff, you know, we're really pushing it, and lusciously we can get to that. But the reality is that it's not. It's a learned process, and you guys have done so well today with this. What was really awesome is that as soon as you started putting in your highlights in here, you kind of inspired all of us. That was like the moment when all of a sudden everybody else goes, let's go, because you nailed that highlight. But unfortunately, it got a little lost with all the other stuff. It's like you kind of pushed it and you've got the corner. Right now it kind of looks like the corner of a storeroom, which is where you would find a bucket thing like this. And I think that's cool, and in a way it's kind of an interesting view. What I love about setting up a still life like this is that you have all the same start. And some of you manipulate it easy and focused on one thing. Some of you are just really, really complicated. Where's your center focal point in this?
On the yellow in front of the bucket.
Yeah, for this and here. But notice we can't help but look at that mop. Every time we look at it, it's not because it's blue.
It's too light.
No, it's too busy. It's all of these brush strokes. All of this stringy brushstroke stuff, that gets confusing. That brings our attention to there. When in doubt, leave it out. Keep it simple. The other mops that we saw, it's a little smoother. We don't need all of this detail in here, because when you put in all those lines, we start going in there, and then you start painting things. So when you're looking at the center focal point, the area of the mop actually kind of looks like a blurred color abstract. And so that should have been softer and set to the side. Well, we mentioned one of the things is that a center focal point is where you have the hardest edges and the biggest contrast.
Right.
So what happens is that we have all this edges and stuff up here, there, over here. And so we're not focusing on that because of the edges. You're not making that the clearest. If everything was blurred, the viewer would have no choice but to look at something that is in focus. I notice as I'm getting older, I'm starting to become choosy about what I really want to get into as far as visually. It's like, can I actually figure that out without putting on my glasses? And the hell with this small print. You know, it's like... So I get now, because I used to have really excellent vision. I could look at things and everything was, but now things are not so sharp. And I'm starting to see how the rest of the world actually lived. I mean, the doctors used to say, oh my God, I mean, I could like see, you know, forever. It was really crazy. Now it's like, So all of this in here is just too detailed.
Join the club.
I know. See, that's what I mean. I'm like everyone else now. And so, but the thing is, I learned in that process that perfect vision kind of makes you paint like a photograph. You know, now I'm starting to see how we focus on things. So the bright light that's hitting the bucket there, it's like, yeah, I see that, but it's really distracted with everything else. The contrast of lights and shadows. It's really cluttered with lights and shadows to really see that. So isolating that. This should be up in the middle third. I mean, it's come of the, if you look at Patty Marie's, is that the highlights in the center and up in the middle. So you started off pretty down below, and the main part of the highlight is actually below the middle third. You want the center focal point to be within the middle third of the painting. And so that should have been up in here, which would have redesigned everything. But you don't know that stuff until you do it and you go, oh, I see what that does. And then you pretty much everything we've painted it with you from life has been this beautiful object, day art, something really beautiful, sitting on the table. It's really simple to do that there. But when you throw a bucket in the corner in front of all this stuff, it's like, what do you do with that? It's a different perspective. It's not pretty, so you have to really rely on your skills as an artist to pull it out. Yeah, when you set a painting up, you want to be able to look at, everything's in the original setup. And so you really shouldn't even start painting until you actually see the finished product. And part of that is to set it up and sit back. And this is why I teach you all of these terms, like center focal point. Where is it? And you squint your eyes and you look for it. Now, when you squint your eyes at something, it kind of takes everything down to a gray value, neutral, and the color gets away and the lines get blurred. And then you can sit there and go, where's my light really hitting there? And if you don't have that light hitting there, you have no business. You have no business starting until you actually get that light. When you get the light, then you can start. So you squint your eyes, you look for the light. Like right now I'm looking at Mary, and my eyes are squint, and as beautiful as Mary is, I can't see her face because it's kind of in shadow, but I can see that beautiful light on the back of her head. And so all of a sudden it's like, okay, so the painting is that light hitting her hair, and then the light coming from her shoulder, and I would leave her whole face almost in neutral. Her glasses, her face and everything to a neutral color, and I'd go after that highlight. And then you go after that highlight like your life depended on it. When you work that way, intentionally focused like that, you start creating some good art.
So wait till you see the light.
Wait till you see the light. You got to see the light. If you like to take your painting to the next level, regardless at whatever level you are, please feel free to contact me at 415-606-9074. Join us on our website at www.thegrandview.org and get more information about our show. There you can download our free book, Everything You Need to Know About Outdoor Painting.